All right, welcome back to the Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, we are going to be going through the new Old Dominion models, the Unhallowed Sepulcher, Unhallowed Sepulcher and the Theokrator. I always go back to the old name of that. This is actually the third time I've recorded this because they had the original rules, which I was very lackluster on, and talked about it. Then they did some updates, and I got a lot happier about those updates, so I recorded that. And I had that recorded right before I was going on vacation. I was away on vacation at this point, not back for a couple of days now, but I was away on vacation for about 10, 11 days. All said, I'm also counting driving time, but about 10 or 11 days. And while I was away, about the day I was going to release it, they did some other updates and didn't have the tools to re-record it then. So I wanted this to be as accurate at the time and discussing the models, since they're not coming out until the end of August, in the actual format that you're going to have them in. So we're going to go through that today. Keep in mind, if your goal is to pick up anything for Conquest, be it this or any of the others, we do have that discount code in the show notes. Strain Kickers saves you 10%, helps out the show as well, and lets us keep doing the things that we're going to be doing. Some of that we are starting to arrange to be able to talk about some more Horus Heresy, since the new edition just dropped. I know, at least for me, this isn't as busy of a time. For Dan, it's probably about an average. For Steve, apparently it's actually a rather busy time right now. But we're going to try to make some arrangements to have everyone talk about that, and I want to be able to go back through that the way we used to. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, just very briefly, is the models themselves. So we know for these two, they are on two long bases. You can see here at the bottom of the picture that they're on two of the big bases, stacked forward to back. I'm curious if it's going to just be a standard base or a little bit different. My guess is standard, but then I'm attaching them together in a useful way, probably just gluing them together right now for testing purposes. Hoping to test it this week. That's the plan. Although I have some first blood games scheduled, because I'm going to league for first blood here in Jersey. But my hope is with that, like I said, to test it out. And I just tape the bases together. I put a Rakshas on the front so we have some facing. But the models, so they are selling as two separate kits. The Theokrator, obviously, or Theokrator, with effectively it's an Archimandrite on there, because for all intents and purposes has the Archimandrite spells, has the Archimandrite supremacy and everything like that. It's an Archimandrite, or the Unhallowed Sepulcher instead. Overall, I kind of like the Theokrator a little bit more. Model-wise, I'm back and forth on which one. As best I can tell, it looks like it's only the difference of what's on top. I know they are doing them as separate kits to be able to cut down a bit on the price, unlike the Tantor Drum Beast sort of thing. But I don't know if that's going to be it. But we'll get into all that. All right, so let's actually get into and start discussing the models, or the unit and / the rules. We're going to go through the Theokrator first. Now, there's a few changes that they've done. And they've done, I mean, these models have been shown now for maybe a month, maybe not even technically a month. And they've already had rules, rewrite, and subtle changes. One of them is that they're now both heavy. Actually, I can pull them both up at the same time. That's a useful way to do this. Let's just shift a little bit. There we go. And again, if you're watching, you'll see it up in front of you. Otherwise, I'm going to talk my way through it, of course, as always. So, one, they made them heavy. They used to be medium. I, of course, preferred that. That was very, very nice getting them out. Ideally, this would be my turn to get, because they're only 6 move. They're slow. I mean, they said that they gave them both a Vanguard 3, for the simple fact to make sure they get on the board well. Because each one of those bases is a little bit over 4 inches. So it's almost about 9 inches that you actually have to move just to be able to get on the board. Well, that means if you double move, you only got 3 extra inches. So you're kind of barely making it. So this is your way to make sure that you actually make it onto the board. All right, so let's discuss these two guys. So sitting at 260 for Unhallowed Sepulcher, 280 for the Theokrator. Now, originally, they were both 70 points more. So there were 330 and 350. At those points costs, and there's some other changes they did, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that they did as well. But at those points costs, they were kind of bad. The reason being is, one, the Theokrator has an extra requirement. You have to actually bring, unlike the Fallen Divinity, which may take warbands with it, otherwise it may be by itself, this one must take at least one warband. So, yeah, and it must include one regiment and its warband right there. Which means that at 350, you also had an extra and at that one point they didn't have Legionnaires, so effectively a minimum 90 extra points. So this thing was actually like 440. Now, originally you could take some extra upgrade, now you can still take Dark Blessing, but you're looking at almost 450 points. You're looking at almost a quarter of your army just to be able to field this thing. It also couldn't be a Warlord and a few other changes, so overall, love the changes that they made for both of them. Both drop 70 points, both are a lot more reasonable. The heavy change is useful in some ways, but or especially if you're talking about in terms of destroying objective markers and things like that, or timing, maybe you want it a little bit later since it's slow, so you can kind of be correctly positioned there. We'll wait and see. If you could hear that, that was my dog walking around. All right, so both of them are move 6. Both are Clash of 2. Theokrator's got 15 attacks. The Sepulchre's got 12. Both are sitting at 30 wounds. Theokrator, yes, it should be. That was the one that was 27, so they both put them up. Theokrator's a bit more defensive at 3 with Evade 1, where the other one's defense 2 with Evade 1. So 3 obviously much better than 2, especially sitting on Evade 1. 30 wounds does sound nice. We're going to talk about the fact that it cannot be healed. 30 wounds sound nice, but it's not the craziest amount to get through. To take these things down, just go for mass attacks. Yes, they do not resolve, but anything that just makes you roll tons and tons of dice, or has some decent cleave so you're sitting on 1s, I'm thinking like Thunder Rider or something like that, they'll be able to put these things down. Okay, so let's go through what they share. They're, of course, both Animate Vessel. That does make them Terrifying 1. You will notice, though, they don't list it separate. If you look at Animate Vessel, it does mention the Terrifying part. They're both Devout. They both have 5 Impact. They're both Trample 8. They both have Unhallowed Ground. Unhallowed Ground now, they're size 4. You are 6 stands for Objective Zone, but you are 0 seizing. That's the change. In the most recent thing, they updated that 1, you can only take, I believe it's 2 Unhallowed Sepulchres in an army. I don't think you'd want to take more personally. But they used to be 6 stands. Now they're 6 stands, but not counting a seizing. So contesting, but not scoring. Which means you do have to support them for scoring. Keep in mind with how big this thing is, if you're talking about like a 6-inch objective, this thing can block it and then some. You could have it where your opponent literally has no chance of reaching until this thing is destroyed. I'm guessing either with the missions I have now, or maybe missions they may rewrite or alter, they didn't really want that to happen. I mean, we do see some of these missions where you only have a few objectives, even a large, say, 9-inch objective. This thing is long enough that if it goes diagonal across it, or just goes right in front, your opponent can't get to the objective whatsoever. So, all right, they did that, that's fine. It just means you have to support them a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about the Unhallowed Sepulcher, because I don't like that as much. So for other things, it has Unstoppable. Actually, they're both Unstoppable, which is good when you're only move 6. And they're both Vanguard 3, like we talked about. So, less attacks at 12. It has this draw event, Exhortation of Eternal Faith. So, it's essentially a draw event. When you go, you can take 3 wounds. They're all 3 wounds, although it could be a different amount in the future. The original version was the very original, the one that we never had any idea of. That one. But you can take 3 wounds, and you get a special rule for the round. So, first option, hey, you take those 3 wounds, and friendly regiments within 8 inches, their command stands get 3 more attacks and get cleave 1. Quite good. 8 inches is pretty close, although this thing, with how wide it is, you could have it turned a bit sideways, kind of drifting, especially as you go into enemies. If you can hit someone in the flank and kind of turn yourself, now you're making an absolutely huge bubble. And notice, the command stand doesn't have to be in range, just the unit, and then the command stand gets these bonuses. Especially been liking the one, it doesn't say you have to have a leader, so that part doesn't matter. We all have command stands, we don't always have leaders. But those extra 3 and the cleave, I'm thinking Anathety really, really want this, because now you're talking at, 10 attacks for that command stand? If you are inspired for one reason or another, then you're on 3s re-rolling with cleave 1. You know, that's the output of some, you're getting to the output close to some units. Some that are multiple stands, let alone that. There's a variety of other ones. Now, you get the cleave 1, but if you have something better, that's fine, you can use it. Any of your command stands would like to have just 3 extra attacks on them. So even say, now, I would say if you had 2 different versions, you can always take the best. So even like something with Bacchefali, where there are not a lot of attacks, but great cleave, hey, you just get more attacks. So yeah, and just purely for edging the regiments. So really useful ability, a little bit short range depending on your facing or positioning, but quite good. I'm seeing this thing as maybe not running down the center, a little bit more off to the side personally. But maybe with that, if that's what you want to do, you do try to run up the center and you try to just surround some forces around it, depending on the mission, of course. Or you could take 3 wounds. Hey, a friend of the regiment in 8 inches counts as tier 3 for the round. So that means tier 3, now they have their draw event as their they have the memories of old, they have the memories of old as a draw event, and they're always inspired. 3 wounds to be able to give that to a unit that, say, is to a good amount of attacks or anything like that. Doesn't keep in mind, Old Dominion, we don't tend to hit well. We want the inspired, but once we're stuck in, we don't have it anymore. Giving that out really helps quite a bit. I'm looking at Cataphracti, make a really good use of that because they want all their specials for when they charge in. Well, now you have your memories of old activated. I'm looking at Praetorians. Don't mind this, if nothing else, if you really need them to survive out, because now they'll be able to essentially do their extra bastions. Those are probably the main units. There's other ones as well. That one I think is very good, depending on what you need. If your unit needs a special rule, so do something special, or Caratids, because that way they can actually reform and all. Other options, spend 3 wounds. While within 12 inches, all enemy regiments get -1 resolve characteristic. And for all of these abilities, when you use one, you get a dark power point, which is kind of necessary just for the fact that you're not going to be generating them otherwise, except you get 1 if this unit gets destroyed. So here's some way you can actually make its wounds do something for you. Okay, so 12 inches, -1 to the resolve. Notice that's to the characteristic. So this is a way if... now, most of our stuff is Terrifying 1. This will lower it by another 1. So in essence, you're not exactly even looking at Terrifying 2, because this is going to work whether or not they're immune to Terrifying, because this is just changing their stat. I guess theoretically they could be immune to stat change as well, but things like Fearless... actually, let's check. I went and checked because I want to make sure it's absolutely correct about this. Fearless just means you don't take Terrifying. Well, you would still take this. So if we're looking at going at some of these armies that are getting to 4s, or I mean, I've faced some 100 Kingdom horses where they're like 4s and like 5s. Well, no, now we're lowering you. And any bit we lower you is all the more we can put through. So I do actually really like that ability. So the units trample at all of that. What I will say, it is a support piece. I like the supports that it does. Realistically, I'm only going to be taking 1. At least for the moment. I don't know. I'll proxy running each or something like that. And I'm just thinking the Theokrator a little bit more. I will say when I had previous points and before I had some of its alterations, I was putting it like D tier. I'm thinking now it's a solid B to B plus. I think it does greatly support. I think its draw event abilities are really useful. It does mean that you have to keep things around it. You do want your friendly stands within 8. You want as many opponents within 12. Yes, I know this thing is giant, but that does mean you have to think about where you actually place it. Though 12 inches off of this, I said, especially if you can get it going sideways, if you're near the middle of the board, that's effectively the board. I know it's not everywhere, but it's going to be covering pretty much everywhere that you're fighting. This thing is what? About 4.5 inches wide. Let's say 4.5. I know that might not be quite right, but just to make, let's just say 4. Make it nice and easy numbers. That means that you're looking about, 26 wide, if you were long ways like this. 26 in this direction. Oh, no, sorry, 28, my apologies. Because 12 off of each end. And off the other ways, we're looking at, 32. That's a lot of portion of the board. That's a huge amount of actual board space. You're talking about probably at least 50% of the main used area. I find, at least in games, even if the objectives kind of spread out, you usually have some spot where a lot of concentration has happened. Sometimes you have 2 different spots, but usually there's at least a location, a lot of concentration. This thing could be filling that with removing resolve or giving to your command stands and all. Problem I have with it, though, obviously, its defense 2 is kind of rough, because that means very often it could easily be on 1s. 30 wounds sounds impressive, But 30 wounds isn't the craziest thing to get through. I've went against people before that easily throw out, 15, 16 hits. Well, if I'm only on those ones, I'm probably taking most of those. If people really want this thing to go down, they can really dedicate some effort to it. I do think it's good. Like I said, I think it's a B. At 260, some of our stuff is expensive. I'm not sure what I would replace it with. Just looking through. Oh, for people who can take it, Theokrator or the Archimandrite. Both have abilities to buff it a little bit as well. They can give it, or a death and things like that, which I think are quite nice. I'm not sure. I haven't put one in a list yet. I haven't taken my Varangian Guard in a while. So I don't know about something like that, or my Centaurs I've been taking, but it is expensive. I think if you're taking this, you're probably not taking... Well, I'm probably not taking the Fallen Divinity. That one you're allowed to, the Theokrator, you're not. Or my Cataphracti, since they're not nearly as good anymore. The giant group of those I used to take, maybe I swap that out. I put this in and try to support the rest of the army more. I think this also helps you take smaller units and still get a lot of effect, because you can get that +3 attacks, which for some of our units is almost a stand worth. I know it's not for Anatheti, but if you're talking about the Kephili, Varangian Guard, that's almost a stand. So I like it. Good solid B, maybe B+. Let's go to the Theokrator, which I think went from probably D or worse, actually, with its points cost and requirements, was probably absolutely F tier, to now I think this is, for me at least, an A-level unit. Is it 15 attacks, so a few more attacks, 3 defense, a bit more defensive. It's only a difference of 20 points. It now is a character. It has pre-7 and has the same spells as an Archimandrite. So, Blasphemous Power, hey, someone's a tier higher, useful. Can immolate, so it can give aura death 5 up to a max of 12 to someone. Hazardous Touch can heal something else. Remember, they're not allowed to heal, ever. Or Unholy Baptism, do piercing 1 damage to people, depending on the number of hits you get. Alright, its draw event is a little bit different. For its draw event, same idea. You take 3 wounds, you get to do something. For what it can do instead, hey, take 3 wounds, trample +4, so it could be trample 12. Depending on what you're fighting, an extra 4. Remember, trample's auto hits. So the other one auto hits 8. This one auto hits 8, but it could auto hit 12. Depending on what you're going to fight, if that is a concern, if you're worried about just kind of leaving the last little bit, or you want to do this so you can then charge into someone and make sure they go down. If I'm going against a unit that's really going to damage me, I'm thinking Thunder Riders. I'm thinking even something like a Tantor or something like that. If I'm going against 100 Kingdoms horses, that might not be a bad idea, just to help make sure that I have a few more points of damage, because that could absolutely make the difference. 3 wounds, +3 to the charge, and 1 power for every 2 stands destroyed. You only move 6. You do have Unstoppable, but you only move 6. That puts you to 8. You're now having much more reliable 12 or so inch charges. Well, you now actually have a pretty reliable 12-inch charge with Unstoppable. And especially good if you're going into a light unit, or lighter, don't necessarily mean light by classification, but a lighter, less survivable unit that has a bunch of stands. I'm wanting to take this into a giant brick of drones or clones, or I've seen some of the stuff done in Waldron. I've seen it in 100 Kingdoms as well, where you take some big units. So 1 for every 2, if they have at least 4, 6 stands, maybe you get a couple extra dark power points, and if you weren't going to make the charge anyway. So I need to hit them so they have less stuff than to hit me. Oh, it's like a 12-inch charge. A rerollable 6 is really rough. Hey, rerollable 4 is so much better. Or take 3 wounds. Any regiments within 12 inches that reroll successful morale tests until the end of the round. And just as before, when you do one of these abilities, you got a dark power. Also fairly good. So I can make you -1, or I can make you reroll the ones that go well for you. Another 12-inch bubble, so we're talking, like I said, half of the main used part of the board. Yes, you might be at the far ends, but we're talking about the main parts where you're probably going to be fighting this game, at least in later rounds, especially with being a heavy. And depending on the army that you're facing, making reroll successes can absolutely be stronger than just the -1. In general, it is stronger, for sure. If they're on 5s, it's maybe not as good, because you're only looking for them to fail on 6s, but you are terrifying as long as they're not fearless. then you are getting a lot more use out of this. So it is, pound for pound better. Although there are certain armies where a -1 might be a little bit more impactful because they were going to be almost succeeding all the time anyway. Like I said, especially if they're, Crimson Tower or something crazy like that. So between their two specials, the other one's much more supportive. This one really helps itself out a lot more, except for that last one. But at 30 wounds, I'm going to be using these, but I don't know if I'm going to use them absolutely every single round. Probably going to use them most rounds. But first turn or two coming on, maybe not. When it really gets stuck in, I do, and then I have to monitor how many wounds it's taken and all of that. So, yeah, I'm thinking I like these ones a little bit more. Although the other ones are quite good. The other reason I like it is because, hey, it gets a free spell casting action. Before, it used to not be 3. It used to be 350 points, and you had to take something else, and it wasn't free spells. Now at least you can move, cast. And hey, if it's your Warlord, which I'm kind of liking it as the Warlord personally, you get a free additional spell casting action. So keep in mind, if you're doing that, you can't move, cast, because that would be 4 actions. And can't do that, but you could move to cast, or once I'm already stuck in combat. Because before combat, maybe I'm healing someone, maybe I'm giving someone an ability, maybe I'm hitting someone. But once I'm stuck in combat, I'm not allowed to inspire. So I want to be able to cast damage onto them with a baptism. Maybe if I think you'll still be left alive, give myself or a death 5, or buff up my bone golems or of death, or heal someone else. And then I'm going to swing. And then trample is not an action. It just happens at the end. Yeah, if you look at trample, it doesn't actually count as an action. So for an extra 20 points, it doesn't support quite the same way. But you have access to spells. Maybe now I don't need an Archimandrite, so I can save myself that, because normally I always do take one. Here's a little bit of that. They said you do have to end up taking a choice. When it was only cultists, I like my cultists with my Archdeacon, because then my Archdeacon can start doing its Dark Supplications round 1. But now you can take Legionnaires. I like a unit of Legionnaires. And when I take my Legionnaires, I pretty much always take a Dark Cenotaph in, which says, hey, if you're claiming the objective that they're on, 2 more Dark Power. These things are really good at stopping someone from taking objectives, but they don't take it themselves. Well, the Theokrator are taking a unit of Legionnaires with the Dark Cenotaph, so at 120 instead of 90 extra, so not really much of a difference about 30 points. That means he can move up. I don't need to buff the size of that Dark Cenotaph Legionnaire unit, which normally I would have to, because if you look at these guys cross, they're going to just get destroyed. They don't have many wounds, and their defense is only a 2 from the front. Otherwise, they're on 1s. Which means this thing can be sitting in front. They'll go up and just touch the objective. I now have plenty of stands to be able to take it, even if you're partially touching it. And I have this guy to make sure that nothing bad happens to that unit. And then, as this thing pushes along, they can stay there, grabbing me enough dark power until it no longer matters for me. The other thing is it can take a Dark Blessing. So you can actually take some extra things if you want. Be aware, Aura Malice, since it only mentions Fallen Divinity, you don't get in a bubble. If you did, yes, but you don't get in a bubble. I don't care about Dread, just on it. I don't want it in a bubble. Untouchable, useful. Hey, reroll 6s on defense. That's fine if you're really worried about survivability. What else am we looking at? I was looking at actually, where is it? For cheap, Devoted Hazlia, 15 extra points, so now you're at 295, and you get to reroll your 6s. So you'll get your spells. That's the big thing. Not everything is devout, and especially if I'm trying to hit the opponent, I want extra successes. So for 15 points, it's a very useful upgrade to be able to take on this. You could even give it Dark Shepherd if you really wanted. Actually, I don't know if I would, but that would be kind of funny. You give it Dark Shepherd. It's a draw event, though. Okay, that's a bit of a problem. But that's even a sort of thought. Otherwise, Implacable wouldn't be bad, giving them Line Breaker in case someone has tons of bonuses. But I'd probably aim it a little more for casting. The 15 attacks on 2s naturally. I'm really looking at the trample to be able to get some extra in. But the Theokrator right now, I'm kind of putting at A level. I think this thing can do a good job. It can support, has the attacks. I think it is about a 300 point piece that can handle its own. And if you want it to be helping you out, it easily can. I like the idea of kind of taking it probably up a side and just having this thing help me dominate that position. Even if I'm not scoring some of the objectives over there, I'm at least making sure you don't, and that can be almost as good. It depends on scores, obviously, but I find with Old Dominion, I'm fine if you score a bit early. I just need to try and keep up. And my denying you helps me keep up. Especially if I can now push more of my force. Because let's face it, I was probably putting more points on that one spot anyway. If now I can push more of my force somewhere else. And maybe this thing can hold down a side for a while. And like I said, what I was doing before is mine was taking Legionnaires and Bone Golems. And probably have those things somewhat together. Everything else goes somewhere else. And it's going to hold its way down. That extra defense means it's going to be a lot more work to actually cut through those 30 wounds. And when you need that charge in, that extra +2 really going to help out. Or I'm already stuck in, I could just give myself the extra trample. Just to make sure I can get through a little bit more of what I need. What I will say, either one you want to take, I think is a good option. I'm a little bit more on the Theokrator right now, but I will preface by saying, haven't played either. I'm going to be hopefully playing them this week. That's my goal. To try at least one, maybe both. Not the same list. But I do plan on going through that. Let me know if you have tested them, what your thoughts are, what you think of them, what you think of the models, or it being not a dual kit. I know I've heard some grumbling about that. I'm personally fine with it, just because, okay, unless it's like a world level tournament, like when I run tournaments, we're actually running one at Maplewood Hobby on the August 10th, I believe it is. So if you're someone in the area, please come out. But on that one, if say this model was out, I don't care which one you use it. You have one, just call it the other one. I don't care. We'll put a little piece of paper on it that gives it the other name to make sure we always know. Play with what you want. You don't have to worry about any of that. It only matters at super high level stuff. If you're doing a tournament, just let people play with some models, have some fun. All right, so that's the thoughts on these. I think they're both quite good. I like the Theokrator a little bit more. Also, maybe just because character. For this, I think they're both very nice fits for the army, do nice support roles, and as soon as I get some games in with them, you'll be seeing some battle reports with those guys as well. That's it for right now. It's just going to be testing out until late August when we can get our hands on these things. I don't get anything particularly early ever, so every now and then they send me some stuff, but even that's usually right around the same time. So it'll all be taped up proxies for a while. So if you can hear that, they're going to be building some stuff right off the backside of my house. So there's some big equipment. That's why I'm going to try to shut this down now. All right, well, on behalf of everyone at the show then, has a good hobby. It's a great gaming.